So I've been looking forward to this conversation with Ann Russo since she appeared magically in my inbox. And I love how that can sometimes happen. She is an expert on human sexuality and mental health. And I'll include all of her fabulous notes in the show notes. But before we dive in, I mean, like, this is like a little bit self-serving, but I know it can serve a lot of my audience too. It's just like I grew up in the Bible Belt, and so like a very conservative Southern background, and I would love to expand and explore on religious trauma, and maybe start even by like, how do you define religious trauma, or like what that is?
Sure. So religious trauma is a little bit different than other kinds of trauma because it really does impact your entire worldview. There's an existential crisis that takes place within self, the idea of, heaven or hell, and just how the level of impact is through every facet of your being. Right. So, and it can affect your support systems. It affects your relationships, your work, how you view yourself. And you're having a trauma reaction, which would be like a PTSD reaction, where it impacts depression, anxiety, your body, your nervous system. And again, like that self-worth. And I want to bring that up again because that's a huge piece that we kind of forget about.
Yeah, that's very interesting because I do remember or have like the memories of like when my new age stepfather kind of came into the picture. I shared some of his philosophy with some girls riding on the bus, and they're like, I thought they were going to be excited about the possibilities as I was. And they're like, we need to pray for you. You're going to go to hell. And I was like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just exactly like the way that your peers relate to you as well. And again, like them, right? So like your experience an immediate rejection of something different. It's something, and that rejection does what? It keeps you in that same space without necessarily asking questions or conforming. And then that self-worth piece. So it's like it stems every aspect of your experience as a human.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm still unpacking a lot of it 20 years later. I'm like, yeah. And so I went through a guided ketamine therapy session, and there was one session I came out of it. I did like an eight kind of series, and there was something that came out of it that I was like, something about wild woman. Like I had been suppressing my wild woman. I guess like that good girl conditioning can that come into play with, like, I guess, the religious trauma?
Oh, absolutely. The purity culture, especially more of the Southern Baptist, fundamentalist, evangelical belief systems, and the way that the purity culture was really pushing like the 80s and the 90s and the 2000s. Like there was such I don't know if you experienced this but the purity rings and the purity necklace and like all of those things are going to impact your view of yourself as a female and your own sexuality.
I didn't personally, but I do recall some peers growing up that were like saving themselves for marriage. And I just kind of knew I would have always been a rebel. So I was like, that ain't for me. I might hide it from you.
I'm going to hide it. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I don't feel, it wasn't talked about. I had to watch Scrambled Skinamax or HBO, listen for footsteps down the hallway. So it was very much like hear information about it from an older boy on the bus. Like, is that the way to discover masturbation and then hide it or self-pleasure in some ways? Like, so it's very like formative. And I was curious about like a potential overactive response and an underactive response and how one even begins to unpack that either solo or with a practitioner too.
I think that, I'm not 100% clear on the research of why this happens. I may have at one point and I've since forgotten, but that does tend to be the case, that if someone will remain very strict in adherence in their faith and some will really rebel against their parents and their upbringing, that it does tend to be those two extremes that happen. I personally, with the clients that I've worked with, I don't think either one of those extremes is necessarily authentic to the person. They're both kind of a reaction or the effect, like this happened, so now I do this. So it's like working with people, let's help you unpack who you actually are and how you really feel and what your values and morals are regarding your own sexuality and sex.
Yeah, so it sounds like a very explorative process. Are there any questions that you suggest starting with, like the in that realm?
Yes. Yes. So I would definitely suggest that when you have a specific feeling or thought come up around sex or sexuality, ask yourself where that came from.
Mm.
That first level of like, well, this is, like we can even say monogamy is the only way to have a relationship, right? Well, why do you believe that? Where did that come from? Who told you that? Where was this modeled? How did you learn this? Then it's like, once you kind of do that, then you kind of discuss, okay, does this actually make sense for me?
Mm.
Why does it make sense for me? How do I practice this? And I'm not saying whether it is or isn't right for the person, but it's just a matter of like understanding self.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that there's a pattern of how to participate in sexuality and sex and relationships. It doesn't really work for a lot of people, but no one's discussing it. They're just,
Mm-hmm.
this is the way you're supposed to do it. Right. And it's harmful in the end of the day.
Yeah. Living lives by other people's rules that you may or may not have known that you took on.
Yeah, exactly. And we don't know it.
Yeah. No, I feel very lucky that at an early age, my stepdad, I asked something about, at one point we weren't going to church anymore. I was like, why are we not going? And he pulled up this map of religion on the screen and he's like, you likely only believe what you grew up around. And then it was like a big, like, if I only believe what I grew up around and this pertains to religion, then what else does that pertain to? Like everything. And so, which I guess, that can be scary or fear inducing in some ways if like everything you've ever believed is suddenly like challenged, but it also could be open and and something to explore in an adventurous kind of way.
And it's very, very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And I think that's why we'll see, especially in more of a fundamentalist belief system, that everything has to line up perfectly. Like, even if you have to fight something that is very clearly a thing, like the earth is older than 160 years old. But it's like, no, we're going to do whatever we can to show you that that's not true. I don't know what that has to do with God exactly, but I know that it's like, well, the Bible says this, so this must be, and it's like if one thing falls apart, everything falls apart. And I could see how that could be very scary,
Mm-hmm.
right? But with that being said, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, as Walsh would say, right? So it's like, go ahead and like, don't be afraid to start to question things. It's not easy. And maybe, you need to do it with a therapist or friends or support, which is understandable. But I think you will find a happier, more peaceful existence. It's authentic,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think authenticity is so key, something I value. I think my therapist mentioned in a session one time, she's like, I'm not saying, not saying this exactly, but she's brought up like high masking autism in women. And I was like, okay, interesting. Like, and I think she was even like referencing herself potentially, but it just definitely, like, I definitely resonated because there was a clear distinction in a moment in my life where I was like, okay, well, this is an opportunity to be a new me or be one that is liked, loved, and accepted. And I guess whenever that good girl defaulted, I had defaulted to like that neural pathway set. And so, and then had to create some new ones for my wild woman that I'm unleashing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. And like you said, it's a neural pathway. So something may feel right to you, but it doesn't necessarily make it right. Like we have to, it's difficult. We have to kind of look like, how is this behavior serving me, serving others, positives and negatives here? If I can look at this kind of objectively, what does it actually look like? Right.
Yeah,
Because the pathways are very powerful.
Yeah. And like making, like choices based on kind of like gauging the consequences, negative or positive, of like our actions or thoughts or that sort of thing. I know you mentioned monogamy too, and it's something that I would love to touch on as well, because that was like the one and only choice. I didn't even know what polyamory was until I was in college, or that it was an option or open. And I think once I discovered it, there was a lot of freedom within it. And I've kind of vacillated back and forth, and I know some of my listeners have as well, in between, or just like experimenting and trying things on. Like first was like, oh, I've got so much love in my heart to give. Like, how can I expect one person to fulfill all of my needs if I like, men, women, androgynous, anything in the LGBTQ community.
Exactly.
So, and then so I guess the question I have is, I saw something that mentioned in a different thing you were featured on about addressing jealousy and open relating, and or if there's any tips for navigating that or communication if someone is curious about exploring polyamory or open relationships or ethical non-monogamy.
Sure. So if you're interested, I'd like to tackle that one first. It's really important to understand why. You know, and I'm not placing a judgment on why someone chooses, but if you're in a relationship that you want to stay in and you're approaching opening up your relationship because there's something wrong in the relationship you're in, I would suggest not opening up your relationship at that point because it's not really going to help your relationship. If you're trying to fix something internally. Now, that also means that there might be other situations where maybe you want to open up your relationship because you have, let's say you have like no sex drive and your partner has a very high sex drive. Maybe you're like, let's talk about what this look like. So we're both getting our needs met. That's different, right? Than like the inability to communicate or feeling unhappy with your partner. So open it up. Does that make sense with the difference?
Oh, for sure. A Tantra teacher of mine the other day mentioned something. She's like, maybe there's a desire that one wants to explore and one is okay with bringing in a sex worker or like to have that need met or that desire fulfilled, but doesn't necessarily want to do it themselves. Or, and I can also see how there's like shadowy or challenging aspects for all relating. Cause I know at one point I questioned like, okay, do I have commitment issues? Is that why? So I was like, I like to, just try on, look at different lenses and questions like, is it the big heart? Is it commitment?
What is it?
Yeah. Right? Like, I think that, goes back to your point on like getting curious about the why or where it's coming from.
And coming back like to that authentically you, like, right, we're given these messages. If you don't do this, this, and this, something is intrinsically wrong with you. You can't keep a relationship. You can't do this. You can't do that. And it's like those messages are really damaging. Obviously, monogamy in the way that we practice it here in the U.S. doesn't work for a lot of people, or there wouldn't be a divorce rate, right? Like something's not working. What I would say is non-monogamy comes in so many different forms. And what I really appreciate about it is you are starting from scratch in a sense. So you can read about different ways people participate in non-monogamy, but you're really formulating what makes sense for you and for your partners, people that you're casually dating, whatever that might look like. The only thing that I would suggest to be able to do is understand your needs and wants, be able to communicate those things clearly. And if you are, this is where I've seen people get in trouble. There's an assumption that the other person might change their mind about something and they're not clearly communicating like, well, she says she wants to do this now, but maybe, that will change. If you're feeling that way internally, not good. This is what's being presented to me. This is how I feel. This is how you feel. Does this make sense? Not easy to do. Some of my clients, I had a group for people that were just beginning to open up their relationship. And one of the participants said, this is the most amount of work I've ever had to do on myself. Because she had to understand who she was, what she wanted, how that would actually play out, what are her boundaries, where is the jealousy coming from, why is that getting triggered? So there's a lot of moving pieces. It is a lot of work. But I think the thing that we don't necessarily realize is there's a really high satisfaction rate when it does work. People feel empowered to exist as themselves authentically.
A lot of liberation.
Yeah.
I do have to say, sometimes my desires or what I want evolves over time.
Yes.
But I can communicate that.
Exactly.
Okay. But I'm like, I do change. Like,
no, but you can communicate. Exactly. That's the key. Like, it's really hard to believe that 15, you feel this way. 25, you feel the exact same way. 35, you feel the exact, like, you're not. You're going to grow. You're going to change. You're going to have different experiences. So if you're just continuously having communication. A friend of mine had a partner, and every Sunday night they'd see each other once a month for the weekend, and every Sunday when they were wrapping up, they'd sit out together, they'd have coffee. Is this still working for you? What's working? Is there anything not working? What should we talk about? Every time. And they've been together for years, and their relationship does change and evolve, and their other relationships change and evolve too, but everyone's knowing what's going on the whole time.
So there's no like question or like question. I know if I have the space, sometimes my mind can, create stories that aren't exist, aren't true or are grounded in truth or resonant. It's just a lack of communication or information.
And it is a very normal feeling of jealousy is normal. And I think that there might be an assumption that if you're doing this right, you don't have jealousy. That's not really the human experience. Humans get jealous. I mean, even think back to when we were kids and like you had a best friend and now she has a new best friend and you're like so jealous and upset. I mean, like that's just how we're kind of built, right? So it's not a matter of trying to pretend like you're not jealous. It's how you deal with it.
Yeah, I guess you could ask for more support, communication or some extra TLC or something if that will help you feel better if you're feeling jealous.
Yeah, and you work like, it might be, look, I know you go on your date Friday night. It really means a lot to me for you to call me Saturday. Ask, does that work for you? Great. Oh, it doesn't work for you. Okay, when would it work for you? Oh, Saturday night. Awesome. So now I'm going to figure out what I can do Saturdays to help me with my jealousy. How can I self-soothe with knowing I'm going to get this phone call, but not like staring at my cell phone the whole Saturday, right?
Yeah, waiting for it to come.
Yeah, so like learn how to do this. And you become more secure in your own self too, and what you're doing and living your own life.
Yeah, I like that. I like, it reminds me of a girlfriend of mine who said, I was kind of, questioning. I was like, I love y'all's, relationship dynamic. What's the secret sauce that y'all are using? And she said, well, we create our own. We don't really allow that, society or to call or label it one or the other, but we have like 3-month or 6-month containers where we're like, we're going to try this 3 to 6 months, like have we're going to be monogamous or monogamish, or we're going to invite other people into our relationship for 3 to 6 months and kind of create like our own customized dynamic versus just trying to fit into something else.
Yes. It's all about the communication and honoring yourself and honoring the people that you're involved with. Because I can think back, maybe before it was popular out in the world in the same way, non-monogamy really looked like a heterosexual partner trying to find a woman to be in the relationship. Like that was such the common way to do it. And it really was very disregarding even of that third person. And, now, and I see this a lot in the movement, is every single person involved is as equally as important. So everyone's emotional well-being, mental well-being, you know what I mean? So it's like, it's not like, well, this isn't working for me. Okay, well, let's just dump her. You know what I mean? Like, it's like everyone matters. And I think that that's really an important transition that is taking place.
Yeah, that kind of brings tears to my eyes as it's like from a personal navigation. So being the person that's being introduced into a relationship, I'm like, I like that consideration too.
100,000% should have it. And if people are not able to do that, then they should not be opening up their relationship. Sorry, like I just really believe everyone should be treated with dignity and respect. So
I agree.
Yeah. And I think that you can't treat people like playthings. If you want to have a one night stand or you want to see what this is about, there's other ways to go about it. You can do that. There's clubs and there's
for sure.
all kinds of explore, right? But
websites, clubs.
Exactly. There's so many things to explore. So whatever you're looking for is out there, but just be considerate of all the people involved.
Yeah, I was talking to a woman that I met at this retreat too, and she's poly, and I was asking, I was like, because I'm curious, I don't really know the language or that sort of thing, and this, because she's living or has multiple relationships, and I was like, so is one like your primary partner? And she's like, well, I don't like the hierarchy, the relationships, or put that. I was like that. I'm like, I haven't heard that yet, so I'm like, thank you, because I like that perspective too.
Yeah, isn't that neat though? Like it really is like there is no correct way to define this. It's like monogamy and then everything else. Because there's so many ways to have relationships. Like I always think about our friendships and how we love our friends and how we get different things out of those relationships and what does that mean and why is that okay? And this, like I think a lot about these things, like what's people's emotional capacity why, if there is a sexual component involved, we different. And what does a romantic component mean to like a best friend component? Like, what do all these things mean to people? And I mean, I have no idea what the answers are. I think they mean different things to different people. And I think that's great. But I think we have to ask ourselves those important questions.
Or or maybe even just like the amount of value placed on like the relationships that we are having sex in versus like the friendships. 'Cause I love my friendships.
Yes.
And I've been way more successful at my friendships if you just look at it from a longevity standpoint.
Nice. No, I think that's true. It's funny. I went to a training. It was awesome. And it focused a lot. It was a training about sex and sexuality, and it focused a lot on women. And biologically speaking, it actually makes the most sense for women to have sexual relationships with their friends. Like someone brought up, like, you're saying we should sleep with our friends, and she's like, that's exactly what I'm saying, because women are very connected through emotion and safety and security. This within the friendships. So it was just interesting because it's like kind of put things on its head a little bit, but biologically speaking, that's actually what makes sense.
Yeah, that's interesting. I'm like, I was doing something right in my 20s.
Yeah,
Or actually way younger than that, if I'm going to get real honest. Like, there was a lot of like sexual exploration and curiosity with my friends when we were really young. But, of course, hidden or more in the taboo, especially, I don't know if that's like our location or where we're from, or is it how much of it was impacted by our environment, and then how much is it a natural like curiosity as like going into young tween and teen and adulthood.
For sure. I don't
know.
It is completely natural. Like, we are sexual beings. We have sexuality when we're children. Now, I'm not saying go have sex necessarily, or like there's age appropriate things, but we are sexual beings. But I think depending on where you are, you're going to get a different message around that. Right. So, I mean, I grew up in a family that was more open sexually. So I didn't view sex as something bad, something negative. Society sends a different message, but my household was like that. So I didn't have that feeling like this is a wrong or a bad thing or against God. And I know that that's something that people do struggle with, and then they bring that into their adulthood and into their sexual experiences in adulthood as well.
Did that influence your decision to go into this realm and space?
Yeah, it definitely did. Because I grew up in a polyamorous household, queer household, and it was men and my mom, and I saw men's sexuality, which is very different than women's sexuality. Really, very, very different, And I had to figure out, like, okay, what does it mean for me? Like, I'm not built quite like this. This doesn't really make sense for me, but this doesn't make sense for me either. So I had to like figure myself out in a really different way than I think many people do. Because it was non-traditional. And then I saw like all this damage that was done through, unfortunately, through religion, through culture, and the way that like sex and sexuality is like demonized so much. That's part of us. And the damage that really does to our mental health and our well-being is actually fairly significant.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, like the first thing that comes up is like the shame or in their desires or wanting to explore something or living an unexpressed life. Or if you do live it, then you have the shame attached to it. Is there anything how does one begin like unpacking or releasing that shame? Or what do you suggest?
First, to know that it's not necessarily coming from your head anymore. Like you and I sit here and talk, and, if we had that experience, but we're logically saying, no, that's not true. I don't believe this anymore. I believe this. The shame can still live very much in your body. And that shame can say there's something actually wrong with me. You feel it. Maybe you tense, feel anxious. You feel guilty when you have sex. Like you can keep telling yourself something here, but your body's telling you something different. And that is a trauma response as well. So some of the things to work through on that is actually exposure therapy with your own body, like depending on where you are. As I work with individual people, they're at different stages of this. But in general, I'd say like getting comfortable with your own body, being able to masturbate, being able to look at yourself naked, without shame. It may not even be about you having a sexual relationship with another person. It may be about having a sexual relationship with yourself.
Yeah.
And feeling comfortable there and doing other types of exercises to release the pressure on your nervous system. You might I know this sounds like so Instagram, but like breathing exercises. But truly though, because those things are meant to help decrease the stress in your nervous system. And that's everything's going on in your body. So you have to do things to help release that tension in your body. Thinking isn't going to do it.
Oh, yeah. No, I get it. Like, I think that, after I did like a yoga teacher training, I was like the first time that like I felt graceful touch against my skin was like when my fingertips, it felt like a coming home of sorts.
Yeah.
And I also like advocate for like the self-pleasure. For me, in a sense, I'm like, I will not fake an orgasm now, so it's like, I need to know how my body, how I respond and like how I can make myself orgasm, because then I'm like, how can I expect someone to make me orgasm if I can't experience that with myself?
Exactly. And again, like kind of talking about what I was mentioning earlier is there's such a need for that safety and security to take place in your mind before your body can even orgasm.
Yeah, a lot of times I've noticed within myself, and then have heard feedback from some friends that it's helped to just remove the goal of orgasm and just like have pleasure, and like whether that's a piece of chocolate one day or like sensual touch, or like I like a lot of like grounding touch, or like soothing, like rubbing on my upper back or shoulders if I'm going to do self touch. And it's so interesting that you brought that body element up too, because I totally agree that I'm like, it's all connected.
Yes.
And like the body keeps the score. And so I was like curious about your thoughts on like pleasure and body work as treatment for that trauma, like assisting with the inner work and the mental health aspect.
Yes, 100%. I believe that 100%. And, it's interesting because the pleasure, I had a client once, and I really just love that she said this to me, because I'm always talking about like authenticity and enthusiastic consent. And she says, I need to give enthusiastic consent is for me to experience pleasure. It's like, it's okay for me to experience pleasure. So it wasn't about, saying yes to something that she didn't really want to say yes to. It was about saying yes to something she did want to say yes to, but felt shame around it, or that she didn't deserve the pleasure. Right. So it shows up in all kinds of different ways.
Oh, yeah. I mean, even some of the like token term about guilty pleasure, I was like, well, why would we even associate guilt with our pleasure?
Oh, that's such a terrible term. But really it is.
And like the power of language is pretty profound. So I'm like, I don't want to associate those two.
Yeah, exactly.
Or ingrain that guilt while I'm having the pleasure.
Exactly. I mean, our bodies are built for this. We are created. This is how we're created. So it's interesting to me that church has taught since its inception, really, that pleasure is bad and female pleasure is the devil itself. I did a lot of research on a book I was writing on female sexuality and sexual empowerment. And I mean, you go back to the original writings of like the church fathers from, like 0 to, actually, this is more like around 100, 150 when they're really starting to formulate the faith. You can see their writings, and women are garbage on the ground, less than garbage on the ground. They are made to make men stumble, and you just got to read it. You wouldn't even believe it.
Wow.
So it's like from the inception of the church, women and women's sexuality has been demonized.
I wonder if that's because they know there's so much power there. And I mean, and they can also, and I feel like it all comes down to like intention too. Like that power can be used for good and or like constructive or destructive.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Or like how can we manipulate the masses?
Totally. But women have always been the abused or the marginalized. I mean, everything from beginning of the way that female sexuality is viewed, to natural women who naturally healed, and people that practicing earth medicine. It's like just the destruction of women is a really serious issue in the church.
And that makes me think about genetics too, because I read somewhere, I don't know if it was in Body Keeps Score or some other book, but about how Like I'm an egg in my mom or in my grandmother's womb. So if I just think about that going all the way back to that, so how coded is it in our DNA and genetics to have those, thoughts or beliefs or reactions to pleasure or to, that indoctrination type of stuff.
Yeah, totally. No, totally, right? Because of
Yeah.
the intergenerational trauma.
Yeah. So is it my response or is it like my great?
Yeah, it's probably both. It's probably right. So, and then as you move away from that, then hopefully, if you have children or decide to have children, then that is another generation removed from that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think right now I've just got my dog.
Yeah.
But I mean, for the greater you, for those that have children, let's talk about sex, baby. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's another thing too. It's like the certain like frameworks or pathways that were seen as like the quote unquote more ideal ones or expectations in certain like pockets of culture or societies or, stuff like that too, like to have children or to have the full woman experience or stuff like, yeah.
The pressure. Like
Yeah.
I haven't personally really felt that pressure too much. Women around me for sure, especially around me. My goodness, the pressure is just, or I should say women sleeping with men. Maybe that's better. But I think the pressure around that is just unbelievable, that there's something wrong with you. It's really unfortunate.
Yeah, it's like, because I mother in lots of ways. I mothered a book into the world. I mother my dog. I mother myself.
Yeah,
I did that,
self is like, that's the most important, right there.
Yeah.
Bringing yourself up to a space where you love yourself and take care of yourself. And you go out to the world that way.
Yeah, like moving from a place of love and not for love is like something that just has been keep coming up the last few months, I would say, or like that's been my intention. It is just like, okay, I want to move from a place of love with other people and interactions versus like a more needy sense of for it. Like if I can fill my cup up and then it'll overflow and ripple out.
100%. And it is difficult work. It's doable, but it is difficult because you have to really like, how am I treating myself? Why am I treating these other people better than I would treat myself? Why can I forgive them, but I can't forgive myself? Like it's really looking at those things.
Yeah. I mean, I noticed it come up in my dog's relationship. He's brand new. He's like 6 months. And so, but I noticed that, for a while I was like, just like rolling out of bed and immediately going to him. I was like, wow, this is such a mirror. I'm like, where did this show up in my other relationships that I was so concerned about their needs before taking care of my own? And I was like, I'm like, there's like a lot of, I want to do a podcast on puppies or dogs or just like the lessons that I've learned through that journey. So like, it's been an initiation in of itself.
I get it. I have a dog. She's 16 and there's a lot. She's got a lot of work attached to her. Love her, but there's a lot of work there.
I would totally love to touch on too. I know like the BDSM and kink and how that can play into like a healing dynamic or just even a fun explorative dynamic. Because I totally believe that conscious kink can play out and heal and be empowering.
100%. It kind of goes right along that line of the enthusiastic consent and the authenticity. And really, this is not like 50 Shades of Grey we're talking about. I mean, I'm talking about people that empower others, empower themselves, right? And what I've seen a lot with my clients that are in those communities is there is a respect. I do want to say reverence because that is really what I've seen and reverence for others. And the folks that I work with tend to actually be more in the submissive role, which many people assume is disempowered, but they tend to actually feel most empowered because they're really the people that are controlling the scene and what's happening when it's done, with respect, of course. So I've seen a lot of people work out sexual traumas and sexual abuses around kink and BDSM because they're taking their power back and these dynamics, and I've also seen people feel get stronger sense of self-worth and self-esteem. And I've seen, meek women turn into strong, powerful women as they are embracing different roles in the community. And I think it's awesome. I think it's absolutely awesome. And so this is not about power and control down to the psychological component of harm. It's a play dynamic of power and control. But really, everyone should be empowered in those scenes. So I see a lot of positivity around kink and BDSM, and also just community building too. And people are free to explore and be themselves. It's awesome. I just love the community. I love the community of my clients and that community. I've never seen people so, like I said, just respectful of other people's boundaries. And it's just amazing, and I think we can all learn something from the community.
I mean, I guess, well, the level of communication that you'd have to prep for the session and just cover all the bases is a lot more and goes in depth than if you're just gonna, meet someone to just have a drunken rendezvous.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. Because it's like the drunken rendezvous doesn't correlate with all the safeties and securities and boundaries typically that it will actually preparing to do a scene with somebody, or discuss what you're comfortable with.
Yeah. I've been very curious about shibari, and I'm having someone in a couple of weeks. I'm like, I know I want to explore that round just for I make so many decisions in my life, and then just that feeling of complete surrender and letting go too is
well, hit me up. We know someone who is achieving that. Yeah. So
awesome.
We'll talk afterwards, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
they're really great. So,
I love that. I love that realm can be applied for healing, because I don't think that a lot of people necessarily associate those two, or there's a lot of preconceived notions around it.
So many. And around the non-monogamy part too. I mean, when I went to advertise my CEU training, I was attacked like nobody's business on social media, which was really interesting because, I post a lot of controversial things, but it was the things people thought that I was doing was just unbelievable. And that was just a course.
Wow.
Course.
Yeah. That is interesting. I was curious about those because I wanted to plug them, but I was also I want to take some of these courses. And I'm I'm not a therapist. I've toyed or been weighing out do I want to stay in a coaching kind of capacity, or do I want to go back to school and become a therapist? I've been kind of vacillating or weighing out my decisions, but I'm can I take these courses because they sound great.
Yes, absolutely. Join the wait list. I have
okay, cool.
Second one's on its way, but those are the courses that have been approved for credits for therapists.
Cool.
But anybody can take the courses.
Awesome. Okay, great. I just wanted to clarify that. Okay.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think that these are just important things for people to have some understanding about. Like you said, a lot of preconceived ideas that are just not true.
Yeah, for sure. And so do you have any a timetable or a timeline on when they're going to be available?
I'm hoping to have the one should hopefully be available within the next few months. It's just fixing the platform so it's a little more streamlined. And that's the one on non-monogamy.
Okay, cool. Yeah, because I'm looking at the Understanding Ethical Non-Monogamy, Sexual Health and Religious Trauma, Healing from Sexual Trauma, and BDSM and Kink. I wanted to take all of those. Yeah.
On my website, you can just subscribe, and as they're releasing, I will use an email.
Cool, sweet. Yeah, because I'm this is just, I feel because there's so much wisdom that this is just my personal, also that can be gathered from our wounds. And I've had a lot of different initiations or wounds within the sexual realm and space. So I feel the greater good, or the meaning that I've assigned for it, is that I can now help people or help other people walk through some of those paths, or alleviate some of the shame or that sort of thing. So it's anything else that I can put in my tool belt will just help support that.
Absolutely. And, I think there is something to having had some of those experiences. I mean, I know that, I think people can do good work if they haven't, but there is something about being able to really know what that is like and what that entails and what that healing looks like. So like coming out of, like a fundamentalist background, I mean, that gives you an insight to that others just don't have. So it's like get all the tools, get all the tools.
Yeah.
Because it's hard to talk about some of those things. And that's a thing with my clients too. They have a hard time finding people that can relate to the religious upbringing. So the more people out there that have that experience, honestly, the better.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. That's something that I'm just putting it in, like, okay, ponder that.
Yeah. Seriously.
Yeah.
People hurting.
Yeah. Or like, I love books and stuff too. And I know, is your book, are you gearing up to launch it or publish it, or is it available now?
It's not available yet. Has to go to the publisher by July. Yeah. And then they will have to do their thing, and then it should be released within the year.
Okay, cool. Like I was like searching on Amazon for it, and I was like, dang.
It's coming, yeah.
Well, I can always update the show notes too to reflect that, if you'll just let me know whenever it is available.
Totally.
And I'll drop a like direct link to it.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, for sure. Because I'm like, I just want to amplify and like spread awareness and like grow, offer alternative perspectives.
Yeah, same. And that's the thing too, Kristen. It's like even though I'm here talking about like open sexuality and non-monogamy and all this stuff, I still am 1000% there for the person that says, I want to be abstinent. I want to be monogamous with one person. I'm very traditional. I'm there for that, because if that's authentic to you, that's the whole point.
Yes. 1000. I'm not judging or shaming or saying that it's bad for you. That goes across the board for me too. Like, what you're putting in your body, what's your,
Totally. Exactly. So it's really being there for someone to understand themselves, not you make them or try to make them into what you think they should be.
Yeah. And just like releasing judgment and kind of looking at life through that more compassionate lens.
Yes.
Love it.
100%.
Is there anything else you want to drop in at?
Well, I'd like to invite listeners to hit me up anytime. I like talking to people and seeing how they're doing. And if there are questions or concerns, I like to do research and create projects and, to talk to folks. That's how the classes came along.
Beautiful.
So if they want to go to annrusso.org, they can send me a message there.
Awesome. Okay. And then the Instagram?
It's also I think it's Ann Russo LCS.
Okay. I thought I saw one. Well, I had the therapy website.
AMR therapy.
Yeah.
So I run a therapy practice out of California that offers a sliding scale, and it's really geared towards marginalized communities.
Beautiful. Yeah, because I know that there's been I know some of my friends have stopped going to therapy because of like financial issues and they're in like a tough spot right now, like mentally. And so it's interesting. So I'm really love that you're offering that.
Yeah, doing the best. I wish we could do it for free. I do, because I feel like people need that support. And, our team really is dedicated to being there the best we can. But we do live in California, so we have to Yeah.
Well, and like our energetic contributions like are valuable. But I actually had an idea this morning for maybe a like collection of stories or short stories that I was gonna like drop it into this women's group that I'm in. Like maybe if we all contribute one and like make it into a book, like I'll put it on Amazon or something, and then we can donate the proceeds just to something. Like, so whether it's like scholarships for therapy or scholarships for something, just like maybe a way to give back that we weren't necessarily anticipating. It would just take like that essay or something that I'll make into a chapter, and I know how to upload it to Amazon.
Yes. Amazing. I think we need this right now. We all need this.
Yeah, a lot of chaos in the world.
Yeah.
Although I do like to subscribe to that. I think there's a Deepak quote that says, all great change is preceded by chaos. So I'm always trying to find the pearl or be optimistic. Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let me end this.